In that part of Asia Minor, which is now western Turkey, in the center of the great Hermes River Valley, there was once a city. The city of Sardis. Sardis was the richest city of the ancient world, the capital of Croesus, a center of trade and culture with a population of 100,000 people. More than 1,000 years ago, it was abandoned and its population scattered. Fires, earthquakes, and floods leveled and buried the city. Whatever remained above ground was destroyed by erosion and men. 10 years ago, an expedition led by Professor George Huntsman came from Harvard and Cornell to dig, rediscover, and rebuild.
When Henry Detweiler of Cornell and I first came to Turkey to prospect the site of Sardis, we found the Hermes Valley just as it was described by the ancient historians, green and fertile and well watered by the runoff from the mountains. But of golden Sardis, the vast, rich city of Croesus, only ruined walls and a small farming village remained. Today it's a village where farmers build their houses with marble columns from ancient temples, and where they drain their courtyards with clay pipes made for Roman villas 2,000 years ago.
The villagers were reusing the dead city. Their children played in the last building above ground, the temple to Artemis, goddess of the moon. Even the acropolis from which the ancients defended the valley was crumbling. The towers were on the brink of collapse. Here, the desperate Byzantines held out long after the fall of the city. In fear and haste, they tore apart the buildings below and used the stone to build a fortress here. The valley is spread beneath. On this plain in 547 BC, King Croesus and his Lydians were routed by the Persians and retreated to the acropolis. Here he made a final stand and was crushed. The great Lydian kingdom fell. The history of civilized Sardis begins 2,500 years ago, when the Lydians discovered gold in the Pactolus and made their king Croesus the richest man on earth. They invented coinage and thus revolutionized economy. But Croesus was overthrown in 547 BC by Cyrus, and the Persians established a new empire. They were in turn overthrown by Alexander the Great. His successor kings made Sardis a Greek city. The Roman Empire supplanted the Greeks. Emperor Tiberius rebuilt Sardis after a terrible earthquake, and in a splendid urban renewal, it flourished under his successors, Hadrian, Marcus Aurelius, Nero. Byzantine emperors followed the Romans and reigned in the sign of the cross. Then in 616 AD, the lower city was wiped out by raiding Persians. Only the citadel remained. Finally, the Turks conquered the area.
The archaeologist's day begins with the sunrise. Andrew Ramage staggers to a 6 a.m. breakfast in the main building. The morning's work begins in a gigantic complex of Roman buildings, which was devastated by an earthquake in the 7th century. This is the Roman gymnasium, whose shattered marble parts are spread over 5 acres. Since 1958, we have freed one hall after another.
Today, archaeologist Tom Crabble begins a new room. He starts by mapping out an area to be dug. The accumulated rubbish and topsoil of recent periods is removed by workmen using heavy picks and shovels. Each shovelful of earth is handled and examined many times. From the digger to the wheelbarrow, from the wheelbarrow to the railway lorry, from the railway lorries to a dump at a distance from the excavations. To free a big building, archaeologists must move thousands of tons of earth in this manner.
Across the road from the Roman gymnasium lies the much deeper dig of the Lydian market, a commercial area 1,000 years older than the Roman gymnasium. Hoists bring earth up from 30 feet below the surface, from the marketplace where the inhabitants of the city traded in the time of Croesus and of the great Lydian kingdom. On the lowest levels, the diggers are discovering evidence of a disaster of the 7th century BC. Then the city was attacked and burned by barbarians from southern Russia. We found these bones of a little girl. She was killed in her sleep when the burning roof of her house collapsed upon her.
The history of a place is reconstructed from the very hard objects which survive underground. Bones, bricks, pottery. When an object is found, its position is marked. Then it is washed by the village elder, known as Santa Claus. Later it is identified, sorted, and counted. Most of the ordinary kitchen crockery is then dumped. But the rare decorated pieces are saved.
The Lydians loved to draw animals and monsters, a sphinx, deer, lion, eagle, and dog.
It is very rare to find a complete jar. This one has been here nearly 3,000 years. Sometimes they contain bones or coin hoards, but this one is a disappointment and contains nothing but dust. Nevertheless, it will give valuable information. Its pieces are taken to headquarters to be restored by the potter Mustafa. When completed, the jar will go to the recording shed, where every object from pots to human bones is described and drawn. Then it will be given a place on the shelves with thousands of other objects. When all the evidence is in, the ruined buildings can be drawn and reconstructed. This is the world's largest early synagogue, built at Sardis 1,700 years ago. Now only the foundations remain, but work has begun to restore its original beauty.
Sculptures recovered here in 100 pieces now arrive fresh from repair in our laboratory. The two pairs of lions are replaced in the positions in which they were found. Originally, they were made by Lydians in the time of Croesus. Then, several centuries later, the Hebrew congregation appropriated them as symbols for the Lion of Judah.
The lion stood in front of a great apse with benches for 70 elders. The building was paved with mosaic, over 10,000 feet of it in the main hall alone. Scattered throughout the synagogue were menorahs and Hebrew inscriptions, one saying, Shalom, peace. The table between the lions was decorated with eagles. Since the marble legs have cracked, we're making a cast of the table which will be placed in the synagogue. The original will go to the museum. A marble bowl was part of a powerful fountain in the forecourt of the synagogue. A portion of the bowl was missing and is replaced in cast cement. Later, the fountain will be returned to the synagogue. And there are thousands of other fragments to be fitted together. Professor Majeski of the New York Conservation Center is sorting 80 capitals of semi-columns which lined the walls. Between the columns were panels of many colored inlaid marbles. These are arranged to approximate the original effect. The pattern is formed upside down and cemented on the back with plaster. Once, the synagogue walls were covered with such brilliant decorations. The floor mosaics are also being restored. Grimy with age, they are cleaned inch by inch. The archaeologists have found an inscription. We will speed up the action to show their work. The inscription tells us that in the 3rd century, a Jewish city councilor gave this portion of the mosaic. The cleaned mosaics are as brilliant as when they were made. This golden vase with the water of life came from the apse of the synagogue. There are Roman mosaics with mazes of intricate patterns. And in another building, a seascape with frolicking dolphins. In another, lions and tigers hunt an eagle, a timid stag, and an anxious hare.
In another part of the synagogue, we make a surprising discovery. A sculptured lion of the time of Croesus has been found, built into the foundation of a wall. To the Jewish builders, he had no value except as a building material, and was reused as a foundation stone. Now, after 2,000 years of neglect, he is again valuable for history and for art. The lion proves to have a very lovable personality. The workmen are delighted and excited about his discovery. They want to pose with him and to pet him.
Reconstruction is farther along in the Roman gymnasium, where the day's work began. Work is centered around 4 gigantic spiral-fluted columns first uncovered in 1965. Each new piece is given a number. Then its find spot is recorded by a camera hoisted on a bipod. The bipod is swung to cover the area in stereoscopic photographs. Finally, the fragments are fitted together.
What we have learned is summed up in working drawings. They show a vast marble court, a gate with 30-foot marble columns, an arch, and the baths beyond. The next step is the actual reconstruction.
Where ancient masonry is weak or missing, new pieces are carved and cemented into place. By the end of the season, the great entrance gate had gone up 40 feet. We are looking here at the back wall, where work is going forward on domed niches. Missing parts of the superb marble fittings are carved on the spot by skilled masons. Most of the work is done with hand tools the Romans might have used, but there are also modern electric drills and saws. Fragments are cemented together with metal pegs, molten lead, and epoxy glue. Thus pieced together, the columns are hoisted with winches and tripods. This piece weighs 5 tons. They are aligned in mid-air and missing parts replaced with steel and concrete.
When the final touches have been made to the tops of the columns, the capitals are hoisted into place. For us, this is the crowning achievement of 3 summers of work. Yet these are only the largest of a total of 64 columns to be restored in the gymnasium court. We discovered what a terrific investment of time and skill it was for the ancients when a missing capital had to be replaced by a modern marble carver. Just a simplified copy took him 8 weeks to complete.
The beautifully carved columns and capitals show the enormous skill and decorative splendor of Roman architecture at its height. There are pilasters with traditional leaf and flower designs. There are carved human heads, perhaps representing goddesses and gods. And there is the powerful abstract symmetry of later Byzantine capitals used in a restoration. As dusk falls and the working day ends at the Roman gymnasium, another shift is just beginning among the royal Lydian tombs on the other side of the valley. Here the kings and their courts were buried in splendor, with the size of the mound indicating the importance of the individual.
The large mound in the center is almost a mile in circumference. It is called Split Belly Mound by the natives because of a gash in its side opened by ancient thieves. Over extremely rough roads, it's about 12 miles from the expedition camp to this great mound. We built a second camp at its base and began to drive tunnels toward the center, intending to find the royal tomb. The work proceeds in shifts with professional coal miners in charge, and goes on day and night. Within, what treasures might there not lie in such a royal burial? The ancient historian Herodotus speaks of vessels of gold of various kinds, of golden mixing bowls weighing 500 pounds, of couches overlaid with gold and silver, of golden cups and richly colored garments, and of ingots 18 inches long and the image of a lion in refined gold. All of this might lie in such a royal tomb. "200 feet into the mound, the diggers found a carved wall. 6 feet high and 2 feet thick, it curved gradually to form a circle. On it were chiseled signs, probably belonging to the dead King Gyges.
The tomb must be within this wall. A crew works day and night in the center of the mound, trying to follow striations made when it was originally piled. Every 3 feet, a shoring frame must be built. The crew moves only a yard in an 8-hour shift. In this way, more than 300 feet of tunnels have been opened within the mound.
Often our modern tunnels were intersected by the narrow burrows of the ancient grave robbers. These we followed at great personal risk as far as crumbling earth and low headroom would allow. As this miner demonstrates, there is room for only one man to crawl through at a time. The ancient treasure hunters must have worked all alone and in the dark. None of their tunnels has led to the tomb chamber.
At the end of the 1966 season, the oldest timbers were rotting, and there was danger to the lives of the workmen. Time and money had run out. The entrance to the inner tunnels was walled up, and the search was abandoned, at least until further funds are found. The royal mound has frustrated every effort of ancient and modern man, and keeps it secret.
The expedition has had better success in other mounds of the royal cemetery, and the tombs excavated there suggest what is undiscovered in the mound of Gyges. Tepe, or Smoky Mound, was opened in 1966 by modern grave robbers. Here I make a preliminary exploration of the hole through which the treasure hunters had entered. The narrow entrance leads to a tunnel with a stone roof, which runs toward the center of the mound. There is room to crawl forward only for a short distance, and our way is blocked by heaps of human bones.
As excavation proceeded, we discovered that this tomb, originally built for one Lydian nobleman, was found and reused by the early Christians. They packed it to the roof with the bodies of 150 people. There are men, women, and children, perhaps the victims of a plague. When the mass grave is cleared, there is room to walk through a long entrance passageway, to a second passage, and then to the tomb chamber. The nobleman lay on a stone couch, which has been destroyed by the grave robbers.
It is a place to make even a seasoned workman ill at ease, but he makes a joke of it. All of the tombs opened by this expedition, with the exception of the Gyges mound, have been plundered by thieves in ancient and modern times. Yet there are small objects which have been overlooked by them and which we have recovered. Fragments of gold and crystal jewelry hint at the treasures that lie in the Gyges mound.
At headquarters, objects are being prepared for the trip to the Turkish State Museum at Manisa, which is the final destination for most of what is discovered at Sardis. The jar found earlier has the finishing touches put on it by the potter Mustafa. When complete, it is boxed in special packing. The little lion is also packed and padded for the trip. Manisa is a medieval Islamic city of about 70,000. In its center is the beautiful Muradiye Mosque by the Turkish architect Sinan. From its minarets, the Turkish muezzin still makes his call to prayer. Below him, a portion of the mosque, which was once a religious school, is being reused as a museum. Inside, sculpture is shown in the open air, around the fountain court or in cool arcades. Here, the discoveries from Sardis are at once protected from and preserved for their worst enemy, which is man himself. The little lion, once a building stone, is given a distinguished place among the finds. In this museum, we can retrace the whole history of Sardis. In the gravestones of its first citizens, the Lydians. In a panel dedicated to the god of the Pactolus River, the source of the city's wealth. In the inscriptions in Lydian, Greek, and Latin. In the sculptured processions. And in the battles which have destroyed it so often.
Removed from the changing fortunes of the city and of its ruins, the lion and the other treasures, the splendid Lydian maiden of the time of Croesus, the goddess and the laughing faun from capitals of the Roman gymnasium, and the fiery portrait of an early Christian sage will keep alive the memory of the great city of Sardis.